a great
That's,
question. I mean, in a certain sense, what you're asking is what is time?
yeah, but I didn't want to be that blunt or sound that overwhelming like tidal waves do.
No, well, they're actually very excited. They're happily to answer the question, what is time? Um, because that'll get into the depths of it. And as we do that, if you have more questions, they want you to not hesitate, but to ask. Um, so, so first of all, what they want to do is to talk about what they want to do is answer the question, what is linear time? Because that's what most human beings know and are, that's what we understand time as is linear time. So, um, linear time for human beings on Earth it essentially comes out of the agreements of what it means to be human. And here on the Earth, the agreement to be human is that we live within linear time and space. And so the linear part of it, the word linear, I mean, means of or pertaining to a line, right? Like in a very simple, direct kind of way, right? Um, and so to call time linear means that you look at it in a sense as a line. And in that line, because of space, we look at that line and define the different parts of that line as past, present, and future. So that we see time running along that line from the past to the present to the future. And in a lot of ways, it's almost like you could think of time as like a train on a train track. So that the train has been someplace and now it's here and it's going someplace else. Right. And it definitely, time in that linear sense definitely has that sense of progression, that there was something that happened that's outside of your present moment awareness that preceded your present moment awareness. And then you have that sense that there will be that which comes after your present moment awareness, which is what we call the future. So, one of the things that linear time does is it gives you a connection to the present moment within a line drawn in space. And that line in space is a line of what we call time. And so, another way to talk about time is to talk about how awareness is connected to the continual motion within space. So, in other words, like a person has awareness of time, let's say passing, or that there was a past, that there's a present, and that very likely there will be a future. So, what you have there is a perspective of a particular point of awareness within a particular space that's connected to that line of time. So, in other words, the awareness of the individual connects the individual to the passing of time within the space that the individual is connected to. Yeah, like my brain's like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, so yeah, so because this is how we get to what's outside of linear time. So, in other words, linear time. So, one way to talk about linear time is to kind of look at it from like a bird's eye view of past, present, and future. Okay. And that's a line that happens within a space, right? So like in this, like say linear time on Earth is the awareness of the passing of time, past, present, and future in the Earth. And in a certain sense, we're looking at that and understanding it from a bird's eye view, right? From a third party observer kind of view. So what I said next is really from is like say from one person's perspective, which is a person's awareness of the motion of time through space that person is connected to. So in other words, it would be like say my awareness of time, the experience of time, linear time within the place on earth that I am located. So, one of the things that is a part of the human agreement on earth is that we are all connected to our awareness is all connected to more or less the same passage of time as a line from past, present, and future. In other words, if I say 10 years ago, everybody else 10 years ago is exactly the same. Now, what happened 10 years ago may be completely different. But in other words, my year and your year are exactly the same passage of time along that line. So, in other words, for the most part, and there's different, I mean, there's definitely differences in all of this, but for the most part, time, the volume of time is equal within all human awareness. And definitely there's differences, but we don't each have a vastly different experience. We have we have experiences that are very similar one to the other. And that's partly what it means to live in a linear existence is that, right? And the human agreements are basically part of what helps us have that connection so that generally speaking, our experience of time is the same. Now, there's a whole lot about like time that's culturally different. You know, and then there's also like, for example, that for some people, you know, in order to keep time, stay on time, you got watches and clocks. So, in other words, a lot of humanity has created equipment and other kinds of technical means to help everybody stay on the, you know, in within the same time framework. Okay, so the important part then about time is that the reference point for time is always the individual awareness.
The what of time is individual awareness?
The reference point.
The reference
So
point.
in other words, as we begin here, I think we're going down a road to like really mess with our brains about what time is. But the reference point is time, is the individual point of awareness, right? Because essentially essentially what right now connects us all to more or less experiencing time within the same volume, let's say, of experience is what is the human agreements. We're basically all agreeing that we're going to follow the passage of time in essentially in more or less the same way. We're not each going to have our own individual reference points. We're going to have more or less like our individual awareness is going to be connected to the entire human experience of time in the earth plane. And that's why, like say from a science point of view, time is seen as a dimension of experience. Right? So in terms of like physical space, right now we're basically dealing with, height, length, and width, right? 3 dimensions. And then time is brought in as that 4th dimension. But this is the reason why time ends up in part being problematic when you go into space.
Okay.
Because you're going into an environment that doesn't have a connection to the human agreements on Earth. And because in a certain sense, what you've done is changed space. Because, I mean, it doesn't take going off the planet very far to get to a place where there isn't a sense of space in the same way of length, width, and height. I mean, your spaceship or whatever it is that you're in, if it's containing your physical body, yes, it has a sense of space. But this, like say the spaceship is actually now contained in a place where space is infinite and eternal. Right? I mean, if you're hanging out, like say you're hanging out somewhere between Earth and the moon, where you're at right there is more than height, width, and length because your height, weight, and length, your 3 dimensions, let's just say it that way, your 3 dimensions can go in at minimum 360 degrees in directions and still maintain its 3 dimensions. So now you have 3 dimensions moving within infinite space. And time then is infinite. Or at least time is no longer tied to your 3 dimensions. It is now entirely of your awareness. Jude.
Does this have something to do with using the sun as our clock, our big clock?
Yeah, well, yes, part of it, I mean, part of being on Earth right now as a human being is that yes, we use the motion of the Earth around the sun to help us tell time, right? It's part of the agreement of, like there's 24 hours in a day thing. I mean, but even dividing that all up is still it's still a mechanical choice. I mean, we could have the experience of Earth moving around the sun. We could talk about it in different ways. I mean, it's just like there's like some cultures are actually driven by the way the moon moves around the Earth as opposed to the way the Earth moves around the sun. Right. But all that really is choosing an agreement of what's going to be the reference point.
Unknown caller.
Does that make sense?
It's a reference point when you're parked here on Earth, but the concept of being in space, and that is so there's no, your feet aren't on the ground and they're not going to touch it again. So you are like a little dust mote out there.
Yes.
And
so as far as the idea of time is concerned, your reference point is now entirely you. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, it's possible. Okay, so if human beings go into space and we disconnect from Earth as our plane of reference, as our space reference, right? And we move out of how time is connected to our 3 dimensions on Earth, but we're up there, we still are being human, meaning that we're still more or less being guided by the human agreements to be on Earth, but yet we're not on Earth, we're out there in space, and in the infinite and eternalness of space, time becomes how our point of awareness makes a difference between this present moment and this present moment. So if you go out of the Earth's atmosphere and you're out there in space in between whatever, the Earth and the moon, or the Earth and whatever, time is going to be about your awareness of your experience of the present moment and whatever it is you may or may not be doing in that moment. Mm-hmm. So you send an earthling out into space, more or less they will continue to try to experience time the same way that they did on Earth, right? Like it's 6 a.m. when I get up and it's 9 o'clock at night when I go to bed, and somehow you're trying to repeat that over and over and over again because that's the reference point that you've developed to be able to experience yourself within space and time.